Welcome to the lecture Knowledge Engineering with Semantic Web Technologies. Lecture 1, Knowledge Engineering and the Web of Data. In this section of the course, we want to talk about the limits of the current web. And we start with the question, how can we find information in the web? So today, of course, you are referring to one of the great search engines that we have on the web. So for example, Google or Bing. But as I already stated in the course outline, the web is big and it's really big. So you just won't believe how big it really is. So how big is it really? It's a difficult question. So you won't find exact numbers, of course, about the size of the web. So what you will find, for example, will be numbers that relate to the size of the search engine index on the web. But also the companies stopped to publish their index sizes. So for example, the last time Google said something about its index, it was in 2005, and then they said they have 25 billion index documents in the search engine. Then, a few years later, in 2008, they said that their web crawler was able to find really 1 trillion documents, but they are, of course, not all indexed, but they are all in the web. And the latest news that I could find was that the new Google search index called Caffeine comprises 100 million gigabytes, and right now, a few years later, it has almost 200 million gigabytes of data. So this is really incredible, an incredible amount of information. And this is not really all. So not everything that is really in the web is also indexable. It means there are also lots of documents where you don't have the URL because they are behind some borders. For example, they can only be created dynamically. They belong to some content management system, they are in some cataloging system, they are in some databases, or they are somewhere behind a firewall. So not everything can really be indexed. So there is huge of information. So if you want to look, there are several statistics, like for example this one, which tries to estimate the current size of the indexes of the big search engines, and this is the index size of Google. You can click it here and you will see that it estimates the size of the Google index to 55 or 50 billion documents, 15 billion web pages. So this is really big. And as you already know, it gets bigger by the minute. So what comes into the web are now also lots of documents and messages and pieces and stuff that comes from social networking content. So for example, YouTube, as I told you, this is an old graphic, so there are almost 100 hours of video per minute. 200 million emails are sent per minute. Google has 4 million search queries, Facebook, millions of shares, and so on and so on. So there is lots of content that comes to the web. And not only that, these are only documents. Now you also have the so-called Internet of Things. So there are lots of gadgets, things, consumer electronics that are connected over the net and that are putting their messages on the web. So what they do, or what they start doing, is they will also put their messages on Twitter, on Facebook. They will put videos to YouTube. They will put images to Flickr, and so on and so on. So the web gets crowded. So how can we make use of all this data and all this information in the web? One problem is we have to understand it to make some sense of it. So let's take a short look on a website. So this is a website from the New York Times, and you see, as you can see, it is somehow organized like a newspaper page. We are used to deal with kind of information like that. So we are really used to newspapers. We see that there are headlines, there are articles. We know what belongs together and stuff like that. But the problem is the machine doesn't do that. So we have to teach the machine to understand what is on this web page. And this is really difficult because first thing you have to decide what is important, what is not important. Okay. And another part that belongs also to the question is, so what in this web page, what is really news, what is information content, and what is really advertisement, so what is not necessary? Or another question is, which of the content, which of the part belongs together, which is related with other information on that website? And moreover, what does this information contained in the website really mean? So for us as a human, it's pretty simple. But for example, if you are not somewhere from the Far East, you will not be able to read and to understand this website because you will not be able to read this language. And it's similar for the machine. So usually we can state that the information presented in the web usually is meant for human beings. It means you have to have some knowledge about the context, about the world you are living in, and you have to have some experience to understand really the problem of information extraction, information understanding, and information processing of this information. But the web, as we know, is written in a markup language, which is called HTML, the hypertext markup language. And this markup language tells us nothing about the meaning of that information. It only describes how this information in the web page is going to be presented. So what is a headline, what is a bullet point or something like that, and how this information is linked to other information. So how this web page is linked to another web page. HTML does not tell us what this information really means. So, and this is the problem with which we will leave this part of the lecture. The problem is, how do we get the meaning of the information that is in the web? And we will talk about the importance of meaning in the next part of the lecture.